Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Can I Have Your Attention, Please? The weekly podcast by myself, Orla Holland. As an adult female with late diagnosed ADHD detected during the perimenopause, I decided to start this podcast series to help others. We know there are hundreds of thousands of women out there with undiagnosed ADHD, many of whom will be heading into perimenopause and menopause with no idea of what's about to hit. So I am here simply to inform, guide, and hopefully inspire you to advocate for yourself and get a diagnosis and access to the right treatment for you. So, in this week's episode, I have a very special treat. This week, we are going to meet the very lovely Nella Dwyer. So, Nella is a hugely successful singer-songwriter. She is the voice of World of Warcraft, and Nella was diagnosed with ADHD at 31, and she credits her ADHD with helping her to achieve her dreams. After her diagnosis, Nella had huge success with an ADHD coach, so much so that she was inspired to become one herself. So we're going to get some fantastic tips off Nella, especially heading into this very busy Christmas period. Now, just before I come to Nella, I just want to mention, as always, you can find this podcast on Spotify, or you can find me on Facebook or Instagram, even TikTok and YouTube. And all of this information that I share, all of the opinions are my own. I am not a medical professional. And I would always say the very first port of call, if you have any questions or if there's anything else you want to research, go and see your own doctor. In saying that, a lot of the sources and the resources that I use are from trusted areas. And if I do say anything that is completely wrong, or if you come across this podcast and you think she needs to know that, please do get in touch with me directly. I'll rectify it immediately. I do take this responsibility very seriously. So that all out of the way, we are going to move across to Nella, who I am delighted to welcome to the podcast all the way from LA, might I point out. Nella, you are very, very welcome to Can I Have Your Attention, Please? We are delighted to have you here. So Nella, will you tell us about your own ADHD journey and getting your diagnosis, and what led you to get your diagnosis?
So yeah, my diagnosis was about over 5 years ago now. And it was actually a family member that was suspected of ADHD. They were going through a tough time, and somebody suggested it was potentially ADHD, and I was like, no way. They're really intelligent and all that kind of stuff. And so then when I went and researched it myself, a lot of us can, I'm sure, identify with this part of my story. I kind of looked at all the checklists of, oh my gosh, this is me, and this is me, and oh my gosh, so that was kind of my aha moment. And so that made me kind of pursue my own diagnosis with a psychiatrist. I was very lucky. I know a lot of people are finding it very difficult to get a diagnosis, and my heart goes out to them, because I can't imagine having to go, finding that out about yourself and then having to sort of go through a lot of rings and hoops, and maybe not even get the result you're looking for yet with the right person. But so yeah, I was very lucky. I went to my GP and said, look, I think there's something up. I think it's ADHD. And she sent me to a psychiatrist, and I went straight to a psychiatrist in Cork. And he assessed me. It was over Zoom, I think, for 2 hours or an hour and a half. And he said, yeah, absolutely, it's ADHD. Prescribed me medication to try. I was always kind of anti-medication. Definitely made a 360 on that. I'm not saying I'm pro, but it's an interesting conversation. But yeah, and then I had a checkup with him and kind of just engaged with him for a few months afterwards. Just using different titrations, trying different medications, trying different dosages. And then unfortunately he retired. So I don't know if that was anything to do with me, but he retired then. And so I still haven't actually replaced him. I need to. My GPs are great. They're sort of always checking in with me and making me do my checks with them, because they know the situation in Ireland. But I will have to kind of engage with another psychiatrist just to monitor medication. But I was very lucky. It was GP, psychiatrist, diagnosis, if he found it, which he did. And that was sort of the beginning of my journey. And then he suggested, ADHD coaching. And I got an amazing ADHD coach, and had a few sessions with her, and that really just blew my mind open. And that's how I often experience that. I'm lucky to have that now with clients that you get to, I'm very honored to witness that with my clients. It's an incredible new almost rebirth of yourself. And so that then made me realize, I can't gatekeep this. And actually, where did she train? And I went off and spent a year training to be an ADHD coach. Even though I never thought I'd do anything other than music, so now I do both. And I'm a neurodiversity consultant as well, then for some multinationals and NGOs as well, which I'm just loving. So, so that's sort of a little snippet of my story. A long-winded answer to your question.
Fabulous answer to the question. And can I just say, you've just described my ideal life. In terms of like the neurodiversity coach for the companies, that's actually something I'd be very interested in pursuing as well. I work for a big multinational at the moment, and I have been helping them since I had my own diagnosis. I've written in a couple of internal, intranets and things like that, and our internal magazines and websites, and I've loved it. I've really, really enjoyed it. And then the ADHD coaching sounds amazing because I've had the same experience in terms of having my mind blown wide open by a coach. I think it's incredible what they can do and how much that they can help. Unfortunately, I haven't got a note in my head, but I would also love to be a singer. I know that one's never ever going to happen, but it's amazing. You have such a glamorous life, girl. Like as I said at the start, introducing you from LA, which is amazing. Where are you originally from, Nella? Is it Cork? Did I hear you say before?
Cork, yeah, I'm from Rochestown in Cork, but my house is in Kinsale.
Lovely.
My daughter is almost 21; she's in university, so I moved her school down a few years ago to down to Bandon, so that's why we moved down to Kinsale. But my parents are Kinsale, my parents are Rochestown, so I grew up in Rochestown, but then I lived on and off in Dublin for 10 years on Dame Street, with my music, and so back and forth to Cork, and then for the last 8 years I've been sort of part-time living in Los Angeles as well. So my music kind of took off internationally with the video game and stuff. So I tour in China and stuff like that as well. So yeah, so it's a mad
getting
life.
more and more glamorous. Yeah, it's amazing. It sounds absolutely amazing. Will you be home in Cork for Christmas, Nella?
Yes, I just came to LA about a week ago. My dad unfortunately hasn't been well. He's doing okay at the moment, but so I had sort of moved to LA in the summer, but I went back then and. Yeah, so this trip was supposed to be longer, but I've just been kind of wanting to hang around with him. And yeah, so I just came here a few days ago. So I'm just here for a week. So I'm going to go home on, what day is today? Today is Tuesday. I've got a big dinner with, very exciting dinner where I met Quincy Jones like 8 years ago. And I'm kind of in this society with all these amazing composers. So I haven't made that dinner, the holiday dinner for that society in 8 years. So I'm doing that tomorrow night with the composer of World of Warcraft, who's one of my best friends, Russell Brower, who's also neurodivergent and doing lots of talks on it, which is amazing. So I'm going to go home on Thursday and I'll be back in Ireland on Friday to spend with the family. Yeah.
Lovely. That's really lovely. It's amazing though, how you have automatically almost created a life that's perfect for the ADHD brain in that there's a huge array of variety in there to keep you interested, and obviously the creativity in the music, because I know you write your own songs as well, and as well as obviously performing and going on stage, and the massive surge of dopamine that must bring, huge enjoyment. So you've automatically, ended up there. It's a great way.
Yeah, well, yeah, I probably curated it somehow. I used to always say, and it's funny, before I knew I had ADHD, I always said, like, I'm much more comfortable on stage than I am sitting right here talking to you. Like, I've always said that to people, social anxiety wise, everything. And I always said, like, being on stage is like a drug to me. Little did I know it was, the dopamine that my brain was so, longing for. So it's so interesting how, I always kind of worded it that way. I've never really, I have never taken drugs, but on being on stage is my drug. I always said that, and sure, lo and behold, enter dopamine and norepinephrine. And
it actually is. Yes. It's incredible. It is incredible. And then just coming into I suppose, looking at the coaching side of it. So you were very lucky in that your psychiatrist recommend, or you mentioned to me that in the US as well, that it's definitely much more advanced there than I suppose we are in Ireland in terms of the treatments in some places. It's just, I suppose we're a much smaller country and we are a little bit more behind in terms of the knowledge and funding and research around ADHD and all that side of it. But that in the States, it's quite natural for the psychiatrist to actually talk about the next levels of treatments. One of them being executive coaching, or going to see an ADHD coach. So, are your clients actually? Do you have clients in Ireland and the States, or are they where would they mainly be based?
Yeah. So I do have clients in Ireland. Only a very small fraction, I guess. Most of them would be in around the world, but mostly Los Angeles. And then I work, as I said, I work with like some multinationals and NGOs, and they're around the world. So I do a lot of executive neurodiversity coaching with sort of the C-suite of the company, or the CEO, or the team leads. Both individually, and then I'll do trainings and then consulting as well. So, it's kind of a mixture between individuals, because I've kind of moved into more executive ADHD, neurodivergent, autistic coaching of people who are sort of thought leaders, CEOs, creative professionals, people with kind of a growth mindset. Because I realized that I was having the most success. My clients that were having the most success were people that were very similar to me. And, obviously I've kind of worked a lot in in the music industry, and I have a daughter. I had my daughter very young. She's nearly 21. I'm 36. So you can do the math. So I've had a lot of life lived, I guess, until this point, that I didn't realize I had gained a lot of skills even outside my training, like my own interpersonal skills, and then also kind of successes that came along with the pursuit of my music career, that I realized through coaching that I was offering something a little different. And when I started to see the results of certain clients who were very similar to my mindset, or how my brain works, as well as being neurodivergent, then I started seeing huge successes. And I realized, okay, this is something that I really enjoy, and they're getting a lot from. Their lives are changing very dramatically in a very short space of time. So this is sort of so I guess I moved into, like, what I'm trying to say is, I suppose I moved into more executive ADHD coaching, if that makes sense. I don't even know what you asked me. You asked me my clients in Ireland. So with that, I work with sort of big entertainment companies, and a lot of people are, a lot of those companies are in LA or in different countries around the world. So yeah, I guess most of my clients are not in Ireland. However, I have coached a lot of people in Ireland, but since I've kind of moved more into working solely with leaders, professionals, CEOs, a lot of engineers for some reason. Anyway, a lot of engineers. It's fascinating.
Interesting.
It is actually. Yeah, you definitely see certain industries, but yeah, I guess people with a growth mindset. That's what I'm really, really good at, and creatives. Yeah, and that's what I really enjoy.
Yeah,
So,
and I mean, you're definitely going to find ADHD in creatives. I'm sure you've come across that yourself in the entertainment industry, and as you mentioned, thought leaders, CEOs, we often hear people often refer to Richard Branson, as everybody knows who he is, and he also has ADHD. So I think it's interesting that, that you do come across an awful lot of neurodivergence amongst people, in the C-suite, and up in the upper management levels. In fact, I
sure.
was reading a really good article recently, and it was listing, because I suppose from the perspective, it was listing, sorry, I always do that. I jump from one thought to the other, but it was
What we
listing
do,
the positives of the ADHD, brain,
absolutely.
as opposed to, we often hear about the negatives, because all of the criteria for diagnosis is about the negatives, and when you look at the medical industry, it's all about pathology. It's about the negatives. Where is it impacting? Where is it impairing? Whereas actually, when you look at them, and what this person had pointed out, it was like you were literally describing the personality of a CEO, because you do have to be sort of a free thinker, quick thinker, make quick connections,
Yeah,
impulsive.
so
You do need to be impulsive. There's a good side to it as well, for sure.
absolutely
So that's
agree.
really interesting, Nella. My God. Yeah, really, really interesting. So I promised we were going to bring some help to people around Christmas. And I think you're the ideal person as an ADHD coach who is working with people with ADHD. And I love the fact that you've spent so many years working with people who are thought leaders. So will have had success in areas of implementing, certain things that can help them. And I know a couple of the things that, so I had put a call out for, what are the things at Christmas that
Mhm.
people find most difficult. And there was a lot of common themes, I suppose, that came back, and including overindulging in general. So not just overeating, but over drinking, overspending, and I suppose impulsivity, plays into that an awful lot. And one of the other sides of it that came up was a lack of routine, followed by then trying to transition back into work and routine, that people were finding these were difficult parts of it. And there's so
Mhm.
much more in that, spending time with family can be difficult. Certainly spending time with family who um, don't acknowledge ADHD at all. That can be very, very challenging for people.
Mhm.
Overstimulation, the lights, everything else going on. So I would
Mhm.
love to hear from you. What would you suggest as an ADHD coach are the things that people could do to help themselves best?
Yeah, I mean, it's a loaded question because there's just so many. But I guess when you asked me to do this,
Yeah.
I jotted down a few things that I have helped clients with, not just at Christmas, but with any sort of family gatherings or just gatherings in general, or just knowing there's going to be a lot of stimulation. And so, there's a good few things that I would suggest that might be, I think ADHDers we love like it can be really helpful to have a menu of options to go to. So, if you have your menu
Yes.
of options, you can pull from that menu, you know, once you've kind of gotten familiar with it in real time, once you have that, rather than, looking at the soup of our brain of all the different things all over the place and not being able to actually pull the thing in real time. So often with clients, I'll work with them sort of having a menu of options for different things. And so I wrote down a little bit of a menu of options here to chat about when you asked me. So I guess, we don't have that much time to go through them all, but a few things I'll just maybe list them out, and you can let me know what you'd like me to maybe elaborate on. But I think number one, you mentioned about, the routine going out the window. I think that's really, that's a huge thing with ADHD. We can often feel like we're in a void, a vapid void of nothingness unless we have anchors in our day or in our week or in our year. And, anchors aren't just, they're great to build our day around. They're really helpful, but they're also sort of having things in place that you can look forward to. So that gives you dopamine in the moment, which helps your executive functioning all the way up to that thing. That's why planning ahead is so important for ADHDers, that we have things to look forward to, because it's not actually the thing that gives you dopamine. It's the thinking about it and it's the lead up to it. So that's why having those sort of anchors in place are really important. That anchor can be your morning routine. It doesn't have to be this big thing. It can be, okay, every morning I'm going to get up at 9 o'clock and I'm going to do my morning manifestations. I'm all into the law of attraction. I like the science of it and the woo-woo mixed together, but that's another story, isn't the conversation. But having your morning routine,
I love it.
your affirmations or your manifestations or your exercise. Maybe it's that I have a personal trainer on Fiverr, and she's in Ukraine and she costs me €16 a session. It's amazing. And that works for me because it's accountability in the morning, right? So, having those anchors to build your day around is really important for us with ADHD. And, okay, that sounds great, Nella, but how are you going to remember? Habit stacking can be really helpful. So, if you know that that's the plan that you've decided for yourself, having even a post-it note on your mirror next to your toothbrush, if you know that every day you're going to do this particular thing, i.e., we hope you're going to brush your teeth every morning, right? So if you habit stack it with something that you do automatically without having to think, then it's more likely to get done. So that can be a way to sort of start putting anchors in your day so that it doesn't feel like the entire routine is gone out the window and there's no sort of handlebars to hold on to, or sort of it can just feel a little scary. And I'm sure like everybody that I've met kind of can understand that kind of feeling sometimes when we don't have plans or anchors. So that would be one thing. I told you I was going to tell you the menu of things I wrote down, and I just elaborated on the first one when I went through ADHD stuff.
I love it.
I think that's something that is really important for. I just had a client and we were just talking all about this. Something that comes up a lot with ADHD is a need and a want for more space and more time in their life. Having processing time is so important for how our brains work. We absorb a lot of information, as we know, and it can be very overwhelming. And so, along with verbally processing things, which is really helpful with a coach, it's really important that we can sort of have that. Sorry, I lost my train of thought there for a second. Just got distracted by a helicopter out the window. It's like squirrel. But it's really important that we have more
Just gonna say,
space and time so that we can allow our brain to have those transitions between activities so that we can process all of the stimuli that's coming at us in our day. So scheduling in even that hour where you have to leave the family, get together downstairs because there's something you have to do or there's somebody you have to call, and letting people know ahead of time, yes, I'm going to be there all day Saturday and Sunday, but I do have a call or I do have something I need to do. Or, and it doesn't have to be a lie. It can be, you can have a calling to yourself, but you can schedule ahead of time that space so that people already know, they're not shocked that you're like, I'm just going to leave if you're overstimulated, and you need kind of that time out. Sorry, I hope I'm not talking in riddles, but basically what I'm just trying to say is ahead of time, planning that space, that you time, where you're allowed to process all the extra stimuli, guilt-free, and you're just allowed to just do nothing and allow your brain just process all that in the background and fill up your overwhelm or lower your overwhelm bucket and, go back then much more refreshed back into the family, living room or whatever it might be. So that can be another kind of a bit of a tip. I think, boundaries is one of my favorite things to speak about. I'm doing a talk next year for Women in Music conference. And it's going to be all about boundaries. I'm really passionate about boundaries. And the reason for that is because when I did my training with ADCA and they started talking about how ADHDers usually have an entire missing set of boundaries, personal boundaries or no personal boundaries, oh my gosh, like it was 25 people on the call and all you see is Nella bawling, crying, going, oh my God, I was so devastated that this is how other people are getting what they want in life and not feeling bad about it. And that I'm allowed to say what I want and need and have that self-respect, because, boundaries are invisible lines of self-respect that we put in place in order to live a happy and successful life. And I like to add the bit and not feel like a insert curse word while we're doing it, And so when I started putting in boundaries in my life, everything changed. And a lot of people feel like, when they start putting boundaries in place, that it's like a threat, or that they might lose people, or they may lose respect from people, or that they won't be liked anymore. And that is what it feels like if you're going to start implementing boundaries in your life. But what actually happens is, by you raising the bar of self-respect for yourself, other people have no choice but to meet you there, not below it, because it just won't work. So what that can look like. I know I had a client, I think it was last Christmas, and he was very nervous about going to the family dinner for Christmas because he'd been very successful in his life, but he also had a lot of issues that happened in his life that his family were still, annoyed at and didn't believe in him and things like that. So he knew there would be a confrontation. And so the boundary that we had was, as soon as he heard somebody saying a certain thing, or that person he knew when they had more than 2 whiskeys, that was his cue to go. Those kind of things. So knowing, okay, what are my boundaries with this? If it's a family dinner, if somebody starts talking about this, what do I go to? And you can have there's lots of options there. You can put a boundary like, when you say this, when you say X, it makes me feel Y. So if you're going to say X again, then I'm going to have to do Z. You're giving the consequence. It's not threatening. It can be something like, when you start telling me that I shouldn't be eating all this, it makes me feel really sad and self-conscious. Sorry, opposite of confident, self-conscious. So if you're going to say that again, I am going to have to take a little space from you, or go upstairs, or leave, or whatever it is. And you're allowed to do that because you set up the kind of boundary, and you're giving the person the consequence that usually they don't want, because they don't want you to have to leave if they enjoy your company, right? So it's sort of having boundaries like that in place for yourself, honoring yourself. It's all about self-respect. And when you start putting in boundaries, you see everybody else around you's respect go up for you, not down. And that's it's such a longer conversation, but that's really powerful when you start to that's what the coaching process actually does. with my clients, what I see is their confidence going way up, their trust in themselves when they start to understand and learn actually how their brain works and learn themselves a lot more and learn the motivations for behaviors. So then when they have more confidence and trust in themselves, then we can start inserting, micro boundaries, little boundaries, and then build on the bigger ones. And their life immediately just gets better. They feel better about themselves. Other people are coming, respecting them more. Other people are valuing them more. They're valuing themselves more. They're valuing their time, using time boundaries, anyway, etc. So I would encourage people to sort of look at the times in the past at Christmas where they felt uncomfortable, or they felt, oh, I just want to get out of here, or oh, that person made me. Maybe have a think for a moment about those times. And that's where maybe you need to put a boundary in place ahead of time. You don't tell the person you're putting a boundary. You don't say, I'm putting in a boundary here with you. Boundaries are not to control other people. They're to control your reactions to, and they're also to value yourself, so that you're not only respecting yourself, respecting them, but you're also influencing other people around you to be able to put boundaries in for themselves. So it helps the whole unit around you, So yeah, if you feel that kind of icky feeling, if you've basically not honored yourself and you've abandoned your own self-respect and put somebody else's, with people pleasing, we can do this a lot, other people's needs ahead of your own, and you feel that when you walk away from a situation, maybe you said yes when you didn't want to, that's when a boundary, that's the trigger to tell you, okay, well, maybe I need to put a boundary in place here. So if it's your mother-in-law, for example, she made you feel a certain way last year, okay, what boundary can I put in place this year that if she says this or does this, then I say, okay, you can say that sentence, when you do X, it makes me feel Y. So if you're going to do that, then, or it can be, the boundary can be, okay, if she does this twice, then that's my cue that I've got 1 hour and I'm going to leave. And that's how I can protect myself. It doesn't have to be leave, but that I'm just kind of giving examples of what it could look like. So boundaries are incredibly, just really, really powerful. And I think boundaries are a huge asset that we can use with ADHD and start implementing in all areas of our life, but starting small. I think micro boundaries are interesting. I always give the example, if you want to start implementing boundaries, use the whole, if you get on a bus and the bus driver is about to give you your change and you usually say, no, it's fine, take the change. If you didn't actually decide that you wanted to give him the change, take the change, and then you can give it back if same with a taxi driver. If, you gave him 20 and he says, you go, oh, no problem, just take that. Well, actually, just wait for the money, because it is your money. Why wouldn't you? And then you have autonomy over your decision. You're more in the driving seat. Taxi reference, and then me talking about driving seat anyway. But you're more in the driving seat of control of what you actually wanted to do, and you're honoring yourself, and that just leads to beautiful things. So I think boundaries is something that's really that could be really helpful with this time. Will I go on, or will
I
I?
think you're so right. Do you know what? Just before you go on, because I think that's huge. I think a lot of the stress that comes from Christmas is as a result of a lack of boundaries. And I think a huge amount of us with ADHD are people pleasers, and we lack trust in ourselves, because especially if you're late diagnosed, because you spent all of your childhood and teenage years not understanding yourself. So, learning to mistrust yourself almost. So, you don't know who's going to show up in any given day. And that leads to a massive lack of self-confidence and lowered self-esteem. And I am like the world's worst people pleaser. You've just described me to a T when talking about boundaries. I'm going to I've already taken pages of notes here listening to you, but I just really wanted to stop on that one, because you're right, obviously, about the boundaries. I think it's huge. And people will talk about boundaries a lot, but you've just described how. And I think that's the key. We need to learn how. I love the idea of the micro boundaries, because it's a subtle shift, but it looks subtle, but it actually feels huge. Yeah.
Yeah. It can feel
That's
threatening.
amazing. Amazing.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that I
Brilliant. Keep going. Yes, keep going. We want more.
So I guess which one will I go? So I guess I don't know if people call it this. I think they do. Yeah, transitions are really important for ADHD as well. So if you've got a lot of things on in one day, scheduling in transitions between activities, between things, are super important. So like I touched on it, like the ADHD brain, we get lots of thoughts at the exact same time, and we're not great then at executing and prioritizing which thought we execute first, second, third, fourth, etc. So that's why we often find it very difficult to, start a project or to get that ignition or that sort of starting point. And so the reason that I'm talking about transitions is because between each, so say if I'm going out now and I'm going to go down and play a gig, for example, and then I have to go straight from the gig to coaching somebody, and then I have to go straight from coaching somebody to a lunch with a lot of people, and then I have to go, by the end of that, by the fourth thing I do that day, I'm totally overwhelmed. My overwhelmed bucket is sky high. My sensory overload is through the roof. My patience, my just too much stimuli, too much, etc. Ideal in that situation would be that I schedule in transition times, i.e. at least 40 minutes between each thing so that I can sit and do nothing and guilt-free. And that's a really important part. Do nothing. And do nothing can be scrolling on TikTok, because do you know what? We're going to do it anyway, but we might do it for 3 hours because we're so overwhelmed and we're trying to get away from all our racing, all the things in our head. So scheduling in those transitions between things is really important. And it could be to read a book. It could be to meditate. It could be it doesn't actually matter. It's so exciting knowing that you have time between things to just calm down and build yourself back up, ready energy-wise to go again. Like, I'll give you an example. So I'm in this beautiful hotel, Hollywood Roosevelt on Hollywood Boulevard. I stay here a lot when I come here. And usually, like, I'm living somewhere or I have somewhere to stay, but I'll come here for transitions, basically, just to kind of get away from being around a lot of people, to just self-soothe, to get room service, to feel a little bit just pampered. I know this is a very privileged thing to say, but I guess, for me, being in this room just lowers any extra stimuli. It's much more predictable what stimulus is going to come at me in this room rather than being out there and just being kind of doing all the different things. So, and I guess I'm almost trying to make a metaphor for, allowing yourself to have those kind of sacred times between things that you just are allowed to be, because we get so much stuff that our brains are very fast processing brains. It's one of the great things about ADHD. Our brains are very good problem solvers, very good, because it has to, our brains always had to problem solve in real time to have executive functioning working. And so, all of that is very overwhelming. And that's where, most people come to me when they're nearly at burnout. So these are all the things I start implementing with them slowly. But, that just absolutely brings them way back on the scale of overwhelm, so that now they're not near burnout or at burnout, they're way back here because of all these things. So that's why I know they're so powerful. So having those transitions of just basically bookings time, having times between things in order to let your very fast processing brain process things in the background guilt-free is so important. So even for, I know I'm kind of talking very macro, but even for, if you're with family or with people, just keeping that in mind, that you are going to hugely benefit from having transitions between activities if possible, or where possible. I think a lot of us undiagnosed until adulthood females have, majority of people I've said this to has said, yep, we've, hidden ourselves in the bathroom in school for a class or two, and that would have been our brains looking for that transition. Yeah. So, I've done it so many times, and my daughter did it, and other ADHDers I know did it. And it's because our brains are looking for that non-stimulus to just be able to process all the things in the background, so that then we can just be ready to go again. So the thing is, if you don't do that, your brain's going to do it for you anyway. And that's when you get revenge bedtime procrastination. And what that is, if some listeners don't know, is you can be in bed and then you're on TikTok and you're doing all these things that your brain is looking for. It's not ready to shut down yet because it's still processing all the information and stimulus from the day. So if you book in, so if a client comes to me and says, well, I'm having a really tough day, I'm like, okay, let's work backwards. How was your sleep last night? Actually, it was really bad. Okay, what happened yesterday? Okay, it was a really, really, really busy back day. Okay, so your brain was trying to steal back some time for processing before it wasn't ready to sleep. So if we actually want a better day tomorrow than the day before, you got to look at the day before, and where can, now let's put in transitions next week for that Monday. If your Monday's always really busy, for example. And then you see the sleeping better because the revenge bedtime procrastination isn't showing up as much. The sleep is better and their overwhelm is less, and they can take on more. So around Christmas, if you know you've got a back-to-back schedule, where can you put in some transitions so that you're allowing your brain just to process all the information, and then you'll be ready to go again.
It's like those moments of calm in
Yeah.
between, all the
So
kind of
nice.
craziness.
Mm. Yeah, and your
I
brain's
love
going to
it.
take a
I think that's
like,
absolutely brilliant.
yeah,
Yeah, and I think I notice one of the things I tend to do is I like being in my car on my own.
yeah,
So often when I'm going from A to B, I spend
yeah,
more time in my car just on my own, and that's exactly what it's doing. It's just it's like as if my brain is just calming. And then you mentioned something else as well about, the verbally processing. I suppose the processing, because we are constantly taking stuff in. I noticed that I can, in the past, and especially pre-diagnosis, would take longer to know how I felt about something, how I actually felt about something, than my peers. Somebody could make a decision or have an opinion really quickly, and I'd be like, why don't I know how I feel? I, I
yeah.
I would be more likely to just go along with how the person beside me feels, just to get past the situation. And then it could be 3 days later, and I'll be like, actually, that's not how I feel about that at all. And usually it's when I'm verbally processing it with somebody else. I'm telling somebody else, I'm like, I've just realized I said this, but actually, this is actually how I feel about it. So that those moments of calm in your day, pre-booked in, that lights up my brain. I absolutely love that, Nella. I think that, and it's a brilliant one for Christmas as well,
Yeah.
to do this pre-planning and thinking about, the number of days depending on where you're going to be, and think, okay, how can I honor my own brain and what my brain needs, and plan my day so that I feel better.
And you're going to help other people too. It's
It's
not,
brilliant.
it can feel indulgent or selfish, but actually you're going to avoid that,
Yeah.
fight that might happen because you're overwhelmed and you're impulsive and you might
Yeah.
just blurt something out. It's going to benefit everybody. And just going back to your point there about the verbally processing, it's funny, a few years ago, a friend of mine said to me, or sorry, not a few years ago, my friend always used to say to me, when I'd ring her and I'd have a problem or I'd have something I'm trying to work out, and I would talk it through with her, and she always said to me, "You know the answer, you just need to verbalize it." And so when I learned
Yeah.
about verbal processing in my training, I was like, "Oh my gosh, that is what my friend Judy. That's what she always said. She always said that to me. You always know the answer, what you're going to do. You just need to verbally process it." And that's, like, I would say that's a quarter of the coach. What's beneficial in the ADHD coaching process is allowing somebody to verbally
Yeah.
process for the first few minutes, and it's my job to listen to what's going on, because an ADHDer is not great at knowing where we are on an emotional or overwhelmed scale,
Yeah.
or even knowing what we actually want, and that's a huge part of the coaching process.
Yeah.
But we're very, very empathic for others. We're very good at knowing, like, immediately, are you okay? Because we can feel energies off people that there's something going on.
Yeah.
Not so great for ourselves. So that verbally processing for even in the coaching session is really helpful for a coach to be able to notice little things, so we can then really know what's, maybe the person was feeling overwhelmed by one thing, and actually no, it sounds like it's this whole other thing because of all the things that they're verbally processing, they're getting out of their head, and they're getting clarity on in real time. And so that's why everybody always says to me, "You're great at talking," and I am, because in real time my brain is just you know uh, verbally processing everything that's in it, and that's a lot of us ADHDers. Anyway, so the
Yeah.
verbally processing thing is not to be discounted. It's really and it's great if you have at least one or two friends where you're allowed to do that. You're allowed to. It's such a beautiful thing when you have friends who allow you to just verbally process what's in your head without even trying to problem solve or give you a opinion. Sometimes we don't need that. We just need to be heard, so we get our own clarity. It comes out of
Yeah.
our mouth. We can hear it back, and then we can get our own clarity on things. And most often we do. We just need that sounding
Mm.
board, and it's just a beautiful thing when people actually allow us to do that. Anyway.
It really is. I'm blessed. I've a beautiful sister who understands my brain. I think she's actually going for an assessment in January, mid-January, but she just understands and she always laughs, because she said, I will talk and talk and talk exactly like you've described, and then I'll go, oh my God, thank you so much, that's exactly, now I know. And she's like, I did nothing, I was just on the other end of the phone while I was walking the dogs. And it is that, but it's knowing that person, as you said, it is a beautiful thing, because you need to know that that person doesn't have a judgmental bone in their body, that that person is genuinely there to simply listen. They're just on this neutral, lovely territory, which is exactly like a coach. It's a collaboration, isn't it? They're in your corner. And I think that makes a
Yeah.
huge difference. So that's amazing.
Yeah. Yeah.
Absolutely
No,
amazing. Nella, you have given us so many amazing things today, and I'm keeping an eye on time because I know you have got an extremely busy day. I wish I was in LA with you going for the day and seeing all the amazing things that you're going to do. Instead, I'm here in wet and windy County Clare, getting battered by the wind and rain and the cold.
I will tell you
But
what.
it has been just so lovely to spend a little bit of time with you and seeing a window into your world. And you have given us an amazing amount of things. So I'm definitely going to be asking people to get their pens and paper at the ready. And I might even type up a little something just to pull it all together because there's so much in there, right down from the anchors, the routine, the planning ahead, the habit stacking. There's so many nuggets in this that are incredible. And I love that when you describe that ADHD people need more space and time in their lives, that's exactly how I feel constantly. It's like a
Yeah.
constant need that I have. So I just absolutely love that. I also love the tip to let people know beforehand. I think, for myself, and I know many of the people, this is my first Christmas going, or first year going into Christmas with an ADHD diagnosis. Now I've been very lucky in that my family have been incredibly supportive, and they're all coming to me for Christmas. But now, and I have been really nervous about, will I be okay, in all of this? And what you described there, that it helps everyone. It's not being self-indulgent and it's not being selfish. This is about helping everyone because I want them to feel comfortable and have a lovely time and a lovely Christmas here. And they won't feel that if I'm irritable or if I'm anxious or, if I don't give myself these little, if I don't schedule in these transition times and do all of these things for myself. But also, I love the idea of saying to them, I let them know I'm going to do that. I'm going to disappear for half an hour. Don't worry about me. I'll just be upstairs. All it is me, decompressing or just spending a little bit of time. And I think letting them know beforehand. And in
Yeah.
fact, if
That's
I'm
most important.
honest, I think many of them might adopt the same thing. I think we could, there's a lot of neurodivergence in my family, so we'll all
Well, it's,
benefit from it.
but I think what's the reason I kind of really realized how important sort of having those transitions and time boundaries in place. Brene Brown has is it the Power of
Yeah,
Vulnerability? It's a wonderful Audible. Yeah, it's on Audible
yeah,
podcast. And she
amazing.
tells a story how she basically was offered something. I'm not going to get exactly right because it was a long time ago that I listened to it, but it's something like she has her schedule. She realizes she has ADHD, but she realized that she needs to have those transitions in place and those day offs or non-days. A lot of us ADHDs like to call, and her assistant got onto her one day and said, "Oh my gosh, Brene, there's this huge opportunity of a speaking gig. I think she was going to get $1 million, big deal." And she was like, "It's only on one of your kind of off days, so I'm going to book it in there." And she said, "Absolutely not." She's like, if I don't honor those off days, all of the rest of the schedule goes down the Swanee. So having those
Yeah,
sort of transitions or
yes,
downtime are as important, if not more important, for people with ADHD in order for all the
yeah,
what might look more important, to get done. It's like, if people are not feeling well and feeling overwhelmed and burnt out and they're in work, well, actually, and they're like, I can't call in sick. Okay, well, what happens right now? You're in a position. I've had multiple clients where I said to them, now you're in a position to have the autonomy over what you do. Next week, you may not. Next week, your body may give you no choice because you may just have a breakdown or a total burnout. And then it's an extended leave. And how good is that for your team, for your workplace, for your, now you can actually make the decision to go, okay, I need time off. And then you come back full because, it's actually no good leaving yourself go that long and then ending up being totally broken when
yeah,
sorry, but we're all replaceable. What happened if you had, diarrhea in the morning, they'd have to get on with it. They will be fine. So it's about honoring yourself. And that's something ADHDers we find really, really hard to put ourselves first, to honor ourselves, to have, our needs just as important as others and are constantly putting other people's needs ahead of our own. And that just empties your cup. And that's no good to anybody in the long run. So it's really important, that we kind of honor ourselves and our time and our respect. Yeah.
absolutely. And I think That's a really good way to actually come to the wrap up, because it isn't about being selfish or self-indulgent, as you've said. And I mean, that's a brilliant metaphor or analogy in terms of the workplace. It's exactly the same with the family at Christmas.
Yeah.
For everyone to enjoy it, everyone needs to, be able to enjoy it. So we all need to be there and show up in a happy and relaxed state, and honoring ourselves and honoring our
Mhm.
brains and putting those things in place is what does that, which is just brilliant. So I, for one, am definitely feeling much more excited about leading into my Christmas after
I'm so
meeting you
glad.
and listening to that, Nella, and taking down all those tips. It's been absolutely brilliant. I
Oh, lovely
can't
to chat.
thank you enough for agreeing to come on board. It's been fabulous. And I hope you have a wonderful few days in LA and an absolutely gorgeous Christmas at home as well in Cork with the family. And
Thanks.
thank you so much for joining me here. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Thanks. You too. Appreciate it.
No problem. Thanks, Nella. Take care.